You know, everybody wants to save the turtles, which is a great thing. Well, if you want to save some turtles and catch some otter, because...
Hey, I'm John.
I'm Jamie.
We're telling North of 7 stories. Thanks for joining us for episode 2 of Talkin, Trappin with Amos. Last episode we talked about the history of trapping in the region and then specifically about beavers. This week we get introduced to a few other animals in the neighborhood.
This week we focus more on the coyote population in the region and what happens if it's not managed. One of the ways of doing that is through trapping, and Amos shows us how to set a coyote snare. We also talk a lot more about beavers and their interaction with the other animals in the pond, including muskrats, mink, and otter.
I really liked hearing about the rivalry between the beavers and the otters. I thought that was kind of neat.
You know, there's a really cool scene at the end of this video where Amos talks about the relationship between otters and beavers and the things that they do to one another to try to kind of get one another. I gotta say, that was one of my favorite parts of the day.
This is an example of one of those ponds. You see there's no live beaver houses on the pond anywhere that I can see. There's no feed beds sticking up. And so they've cleaned all this feed out along the edge of these ponds. Yeah, so that hill over there, you can see they've took a brush all the way back and it's stripped pretty much everywhere on this whole pond. And that's what beavers do, and they've moved out of here for about 2 years now, or 3 years. So when this brush all comes back, they'll move back in here and they'll have the other pond cleaned out. They don't really want to move it, you know, often, but as often as they have to, they're going to move to get that feed.
So how can you tell that there's no beaver living here right now?
Well, because there would be a beaver house sticking up above the ice somewhere or up against the bank. And even if they're hiding in the bank, like they'll have a bank hole, but they'll have a big feed lot, a bunch of brush piled up in the ice. It's actually below the ice, but we can see the tips of it sticking out even above the snow sometimes. And it'll be all fresh brush from this year, if it's from this year. And as you look around, you don't see any beaver houses and you don't see any brush piles sticking up, or feed beds we call them. So yeah, that's how they get through the winter. But because there's none of that here, we would assume there might be one old beaver tucked in the back corner somewhere. Sometimes you get a single beaver hanging out. Doesn't need much feed, and he's just not old enough to really breed or anything anymore. He's just kind of outside of the family. So he stays by himself. But yeah, now is the time that this is regrowth is going to come back, and this is all going to regenerate, and it'll be the next live pond for beavers. Hey, fix that one up.
There's nothing wrong.
Yeah, it's faced the wrong way. See the way the trail's going, you gotta be square to your trail. Like that a little more. Oops, oh yeah. Alright.
Yeah, this is set anchor.
There's your pliers out there, Sonny Jim. There we go.
That might be too high.
Yeah, it is a little too high.
You just have to have it angled a little bit.
Yeah, it's okay.
Just strong so that it can stop off.
There we go. Stay there, don't know if he's gonna stay. I think he's gonna stay. This is where it gets when you're setting snares. You can kind of, sometimes it seems like a waste of time, or like you're finessing them, or you spend a lot of time just trying to get them to just be just right, and then it usually that time pays off. Like that snare's a little bit high, so we're gonna put a lifter stick in there and get him to lift his head just a little bit.
So aside from the benefit of the furs, what's the good of hunting and trapping coyotes?
For us, it's about management, because we hunt deer and moose and everything. If we don't keep these coyotes in check, they'll get overpopulated, and they themselves will break out with mange usually. Like, I mean, if you see a naked coyote, you'd know he's not having a good winter, or an enjoyable, or a humane winter. And suffering, freezing to death is definitely not a good way. But overpopulation will lead to other problems, like bringing down the deer population, bringing down the moose population.
So you'll hear a lot of people say, oh, they only eat rabbits and squirrels and small animals. Is that not true?
No, that's definitely not true. No. If you ever seen a deer get taken down, and hear a deer get taken down by coyotes, and when they take them down and they're like eating them alive, it's a pretty rough way to go. So
will they do that to a full-grown deer or just the fawns?
oh yeah, they'll pull the buck down. Especially this time of year, you get it on the ice where there's no snow. They'll actually herd them. Like if anybody has any experience with herding dogs, how they bring sheep back to their master and that sort of thing, they'll herd those animals right out onto the ice. And once they get those big animals on the ice, there's no play for them, and the animals will break through the ice, and the wolves and coyotes can stand up on the ice, right? So when that moose breaks through, now he's trying to get back out of the ice, and he's got his throat exposed, and they're gonna harvest that thing in a not so pleasant, not so humane way, but that's how they make their living. And so yeah, it's about controlling and right now coyotes, we're not sure how it's gonna work out this year, but up until last year, coyotes are going for around $100 a piece. And so it also helps things like farm predation, people losing their, like we just sold our sheep and goats and so on and so forth. And between the use of our hounds and snares, we didn't lose one single sheep, one single goat all year. See underneath there, you can see a clear hole. There's a few little air holes, but nothing that tells me that there's anything going on there. But sometimes you'll see, like in that one, you see a fresh beaver stick. Looks like a fresh beaver stick in there. Maybe another one in there. But there's no. You'll see like air bubbles just laying in here if they're actually maybe an otter living in there, or muskrats move into it when the beaver moves out. Byproduct of the beaver is like amazing. He's like the condo rental landlord guy for everybody else. I don't know what you call that, but if you look from here, you can see where that bank actually went up underneath. See how it goes back in there?
Yep.
That's where he goes up underneath. When a beaver pond is drained, like the otters will go and pull the dam on purpose. Mm-hmm. And then they'll, you go along the edge of the pond, you can see where they dug up underneath there, like sometimes 20 feet or 30 feet. And then they'll go back into a den site in there. And when I was a kid, I used to go along, crawl up inside of those things and check them out. And they were.
You'd actually you'd go under the water and crawl up.
No, the water's down now. So when the otter pulls the dam, it's usually after the beaver already moved out, so the house is empty, and you can just crawl up in there and you can look around. There's just like a mound in there of a dry, semi-dry, mostly wet spot where they just get up in there, but they, it's like geothermal, the heat. Heats that in there, and because it's below grade, it's like a root cellar, and it's all wet from them going in and out. But they all just like, when you're trapping a beaver house, you're usually going to catch, especially at like a really fresh, really active, newly flooded pond, you're normally going to catch beaver, otter, mink, and muskrat in that house. Like that's actually a community house.
No kidding.
And sometimes the otter will try and push that beaver out of there. And they're like kind of like arch enemies, because the otter wants the pond low and the beaver wants the pond high. Because the otter's going to catch fish and pollywogs and bullfrogs. And if you want to talk about humane trapping, here's something I seen just around the corner here. One winter was trapping otter because the otter price was high. And we like to trap otter. So we were trapping otter, and it came across an otter hole where it looked just like a hole. They'll just make a small hole like that, and they'll keep it open, coming in and out, usually around where a creek comes in. So they'll catch, say, a mudcat or something, and they'll bring up their prey up onto the ice, and they'll sit in the sun just like we are here, and they'll eat that. So an otter is one of the most cruel animals on the face of the earth, as far as I'm concerned. Like, they'll pick up a painted turtle. Everybody wants to save the turtles, which is a great thing. Well, if you want to save some turtles and catch some otter, because those little turtles, when they're just babies like that, the otter will bring them up through that hole in the ice, and he can't get through the shell, and he can't break the shell, so he'll just chew off his tail and his legs, bite off the ends of his feet, and sometimes his head if they can get the head, and then they'll just leave him there to freeze to death. And that's how the otter makes part of his living. He's a bit of a thugster. But his job, he's like anti-beaver pond because he wants to catch the minnows, the pollywogs, the mudcats, anything that swims. So he's going to lower the water table down so they're all like out of water almost. They're all concentrated in one area, and he could just go in there. And the other trick they do, they're very smart. So about this time of the year, if you watch at your place, you watch everywhere you go in the next few weeks. As soon as this gets to about 6 inches of ice, you're going to see a lot of beaver ponds are going to start caving in. The ice will be like this everywhere you go. Because as soon as it gets enough ice that it'll make a sheet of ice, they'll pull the dam. The water comes down, and the ice will stay up. It caves down, but they're totally protected from eagles and hawks and coyotes, and even from humans. So now they have the whole place to themselves. The water's down. They can breathe. They can get all the food they want. They'll crawl up an old beaver house and take that over. They'll just move in any bank hole. They've got protection, they've got food, and they can rest and relax.
So they'll spend the winter under the ice.
Yeah, as much as they can. Now the beaver, if he's living there, he'll go and dam the pond back up. So that's why they kind of war against each other. And yeah, they're quite a clever animal. Otter, I would think, is one of the most clever animals in the bush. Although they're all very smart. And otters up there, very smart animals.
Otters are jerks. So I really hope you guys enjoyed that and found it informative.
We sure did. Again, too much info for one vid, so there will be one more video coming up.
Thanks very much for joining us, guys. We really hope you feel like you learned something today. And if you did, maybe you could give us a like.
And subscribe for more.